Effects of poverty on abuse. Effects of poverty on abuse can be seen in our society. Abuse is an unfortunate reality of poverty. In fact, the trauma and stress associated with financial hardship can actually cause abusive situations. Caring for mental health issues, meaningful work opportunities, and a living wage can help protect individuals from experiencing abuse related to economic hardship and dramatically reduce the number of children living in poverty. An estimated 35% of homeless individuals are affected by mental illnesses, 20 to 25% have substance abuse problems, and almost 50% have health problems. These illnesses are usually the cause of poverty, not the result. When people get sick, they can no longer keep a job, and income decreases. When their income decreases, they can't afford rent, so they become homeless. Effects of poverty on child abuse. Poverty is one of the main causes of child abuse. There are many reasons why poverty and child abuse are correlated. In times of economic hardship, parents cannot buy the essentials like food and clothing for their children. Poverty is one of the critical issues that affect child abuse. It makes children vulnerable to abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Children born into poverty have a higher chance of infancy mortality and disability, which puts them at a higher risk of physical or mental harm. Children are more likely to experience hunger and malnutrition, which will cause poor development by not having enough vitamins or minerals in their diet. They are also vulnerable to failing school since they do not have access to proper education and they lack adequate support from adults. Effects of poverty on women abuse. Poverty is a multifaceted phenomenon rooted in both structural inequality and individual failure. While it afflicts different demographics in various ways, the effects of poverty on women's abuse are especially pronounced. These trends persist despite efforts to educate the public about their causes and possible strategies for addressing them. Poverty is an economic state that can be both a cause and consequence of abuse. In Canada and globally, women are disproportionately affected by poverty, with rates of poverty higher for women than men. Poverty is the main cause of domestic abuse. The United States Department of Health and Human Services reported that nearly half of American families living in poverty were confronted with violence in their homes. More than one-third of female homicide victims are killed by an intimate partner because they were an easy target due to their economic dependence. Effects of poverty on abuse. Effects of poverty on men abuse. Poverty is a humanitarian problem with many different causes and solutions. The government is tasked with finding solutions to this economic issue that poses a great danger to the people since it creates a vicious cycle of suffering and breeds other social problems such as gender discrimination and unequal access to education. Many of the children living in poverty were abused while they were young and suffered terrible trauma as a result. This has had a huge impact on their ability to function in society. Some of them are even unable to form attachments with other people, struggling to work together in any capacity. That is the very essence of the problem afflicting our young adults today. They cannot function in society because they never learned how to when they were young. Effects of poverty on transgender abuse. Poverty occurs globally in both rural and urban areas. In 2011, nearly 1.4 billion people were estimated to be living in extreme poverty, defined by the World Bank as those who live on less than $1.25 per day. It is recognized that poverty can be associated with significantly reduced access to and utilization of healthcare and education services, which often results in decreased socioeconomic status and further perpetuates the cycle of poverty. Though there are few hard facts on the transgender poverty rate, some studies conclude that transgender individuals are at a higher risk of social exclusion and thus may experience higher rates of poverty relative to their cisgender counterparts. Transgender people have high rates of poverty and homelessness, along with high levels of incarceration, unemployment, and HIV infection. Of the transgender population experiencing homelessness in Washington, D.C., 64% are Black/African American, yet they represent fewer than 3% of the city's total Black/African American population. According to the National Center for Transgender Equality report in 2011, 47% of all transgender people live below the poverty line compared to 12% of the general American public, while respondents of color ranged from 23% to 49%. In addition, 32% of those who participated in the survey reported being bounced from a job due to discrimination as a result of their gender identity. It is easy to see that outcomes can be detrimental. Effects of poverty on animal abuse. In the United States, there are breeding farms that use and abuse animals for profit. Dogfighting, cockfighting, and much more. Two main reasons for these animal abusers: one is poverty-related, and the other is lack of compassion for these types of animals. The effects of poverty on animals are hard to imagine. Lack of food leads to starvation and suffering. Loss of shelter leaves pets open to extreme winter and summer elements, driving them indoors for the necessary food and water. Not only do these animals have no access to medical attention, but they also suffer from malnutrition and disease. To reduce poverty, governments should mix macroeconomics and microeconomics policies to achieve faster and more equitable growth. In every country, there are many abused and neglected companion animals, hence animal protection laws and standards should be upheld. Effects of poverty on financial abuse. Poverty is a situation where a person or family has limited or no resources to obtain basic human needs such as food and shelter. There are about 1 billion people living in poverty worldwide. Financial abuse, it refers to the misuse of someone's money, property, or other assets. One of the significant problems that plague the poor is financial abuse by the people around them. This may be because of greed, pressure from society, or a simple lack of information. Financial abuse can be silent, unrecognized, and very cleverly perpetrated by one in authority and trust. As economic deprivation escalates, the ability of a victim to defend themselves decreases, further exacerbating the imbalance of power embedded within the abusive relationship. Effects of poverty on emotional or psychological abuse. Emotional or psychological abuse is a type of abuse characterized by behavior that may affect a person's ability to function in the family unit, school, and work. Signs of emotional or psychological abuse include isolation, withholding of affection, unreasonable expectations, verbal aggression, humiliation, threats, and unpredictable behavior. Changes in behavior such as depression or suicidal behaviors and regression in developmental stages are also linked to emotional and psychological abuse. Physical abuse is often present when it comes to emotional or psychological abuse. Pregnant women who have low incomes are more likely to experience emotional and psychological problems than their wealthier counterparts. The stress that can result from financial hardship is a leading cause of violence towards children, which in turn is linked to poverty. Therefore, a better understanding of the effects of poverty on children is necessary to create effective child rearing. Effects of poverty on child education. The causes of poverty affect millions of children around the world, with poverty's effects on child education being a leading cause. Children are not able to complete school because they are left to care for younger siblings and family members while parents can't afford childcare, causing many children to fall behind in their studies and ultimately drop out. Without education, most children will be forced into desperate careers like prostitution, drug trafficking, or other criminal activities. The effects of poverty on child education are evident in a number of factors, including the psychological and physical health, nutrition, and social-emotional well-being of the child. These factors both influence and are influenced by the child's ability to learn and retain information. Overall, children who live in poverty have limited resources that prevent them from developing their full potential as students and people, therefore creating a vicious cycle of illiteracy and social injustices.